A single candle in a dark room. Notice what happens the moment you look at it. The rest of the room disappears. Not really, but something in you decides it has. The walls go soft. The corners go quiet. Only the flame remains, small and certain, holding the whole of your attention in its narrow orange hand. This is the oldest trick reality plays on you. Or the oldest gift it offers, depending on where you're standing when you ask the question. Where you look becomes where you live. Not metaphorically. Not as a saying stitched onto a coffee mug. Something closer to the bone than that. The eye moves. The mind follows. And the world, vast, humming, indifferent, narrows itself to fit inside whatever you decided was worth seeing. Think of a name you hear for the first time, a stranger's, a brand, a small unfamiliar word. For days it means nothing. Background noise. Then, without asking permission, it starts appearing everywhere. On a passing truck. In a stranger's conversation. On the spine of a book you walk by without meaning to look. The world did not change. Something in you changed, and the world simply became visible in a new way, the way a room becomes visible when a lamp is finally switched on. The furniture was always there. You just weren't looking. There is an old and quiet suspicion, carried across cultures and centuries in different clothing, that attention is not a passive thing. Not a camera, simply recording what happens to pass in front of it. Something closer to a hand. Something that reaches out and touches what it finds, and in touching, changes it, however slightly, however slowly. A hunter learns to see the deer trail invisible to everyone else. A mother learns to hear her child's cry inside a crowded room of other cries. A grieving person learns to see reminders of the one they lost in every falling leaf, every empty chair, every song that plays a half second too long on the radio. Different eyes. Same room. None of this asks you to believe in magic. It only asks you to notice something plain and strange, that two people can stand in the exact same field, at the exact same hour, under the exact same sky, and walk away from it having lived in two different worlds. One saw wildflowers. The other saw weeds needing to be pulled. Which one was right? The question itself might be the wrong shape. Maybe the field held both, quietly, the whole time, and it was the looking that decided which one got to be real, for a while, in that particular life. Think of an old house, the kind passed down through a family for generations. One grandchild remembers it as the place where laughter lived, long tables, warm bread, a porch that held every summer evening it was ever given. Another remembers the same walls as the place where silence sat too heavy, where doors closed too hard, where nobody quite said what needed saying. Neither one is lying. The house held both. It always does. What each carries forward, what shapes the homes they build afterward, the rooms they choose to fill with light or leave in shadow, has less to do with the house itself, and more to do with which rooms their attention learned to enter first, and stay longest in. So here is the shape of the thing we are circling tonight. Not a law carved into stone, not a secret kept from the world and handed down to the worthy few, but an old, recurring human suspicion, dressed in the language of prophets, poets, and physicists alike, in different centuries, using different words for the same ache. That focus is not simply how we notice reality. It might be, in some small and enormous way, how we help build it. What would it mean to take that seriously? Not as fact. Not as certainty. But as a question worth sitting inside of, for a while, in the dark, with the candle still burning. Let's stay here a moment longer, and let the layers open, one at a time, the way a hand slowly opens when it finally decides to let something go. Layer 1 lives on the surface, where attention shapes what we simply notice. Consider a busy street, thick with motion, cars, voices, dogs on leashes, someone arguing on a phone. Your senses receive almost none of it. They cannot. The brain filters mercilessly, keeping perhaps a fraction of what actually passes before the eyes. What gets kept? Whatever you were already looking for. There's an old experiment, often repeated in psychology classrooms, involving a video of people passing a basketball. Viewers are told to count the passes. Most do, successfully. And most also miss, entirely, completely. A person in a gorilla suit who walks directly through the center of the frame, stops, beats their chest, and walks away. Not a small detail. Not a shadow at the edge of vision. A gorilla. In the middle of everything. Invisible, not because it wasn't there, but because attention had already been spent elsewhere, and there was none left over to spend on it. This is not a flaw in the human mind. It might be the oldest form of mercy the mind ever gave itself, because a creature that tried to notice everything, all the time, would notice nothing at all. Would drown in it. Would be unable to find the deer trail, the child's cry, the falling leaf that meant something. Focus is the price we pay for meaning. Every act of attention is also an act of refusal, 1,000 refusals, wearing the coat of a single choice. Consider a musician tuning an instrument in a room full of noise. Somewhere beneath the chatter, beneath the shuffling chairs, there is one string, slightly flat, almost imperceptible to anyone else. The untrained ear hears only noise. The trained ear hears that single string, calling out from underneath everything else, as clearly as if it were alone in the room. Training did that. Not magic. Repetition, care, thousands of small returns to the same kind of listening, until the ear no longer had to search. It simply arrived, already knowing where to land. This is what focus becomes, given enough time. Not effort anymore. Habit. A worn path through tall grass, easier to walk each time it's walked, until eventually the walking happens almost without you. And this is where the surface begins to bend downward, towards something deeper, because if attention decides what we notice, it also, slowly, decides what we come to expect. An expectation has a strange habit of arranging the future to resemble itself. This is layer 2, where focus stops being only a filter, and starts becoming something closer to a compass. A person convinced the world is unkind will find unkindness. Not because they invent it out of nothing. Cruelty is real, scattered everywhere, easy enough to find if that's the net you're holding out. But their eyes become practiced. Skilled. Fast. They catch the slight before it finishes landing. They remember the sharp word and forget the gentle one that came an hour later. A person convinced the world holds warmth in it somewhere will find that, too. Not because the world became kinder to accommodate them, but because their attention learned a different hunting ground, and came home each evening with a different kind of catch. 2 nets. 1 ocean. This is not the same as saying suffering is chosen, or that pain can be blinked away by simply deciding to see differently. That would be a cruelty of its own, dressed up as comfort, the kind that asks the wounded to smile faster than the wound allows. Some griefs are structural. Some wounds are real, and no angle of looking makes them lighter. But within the weight of what is real, there remains, almost always, a narrower question. Not what happened, but what, inside what happened, will I carry forward as the lesson? And that second question, quieter than the first, seems to belong to focus more than to fact. There's a particular kind of traveler who returns from every trip with the same complaint: the food was wrong, the people were cold, the streets too loud or too quiet, nothing quite as it should have been. And there's another kind, standing in the very same cities, who returns speaking of a stranger's small kindness, a meal shared with people whose language they didn't know, a quiet street at dawn that felt like a gift nobody else noticed. Both travelers are telling the truth. Both cities were real. But only one of them went looking for something to love, and found, unsurprisingly, exactly that, because attention, given enough repetition, stops being a search and starts being a shape. A groove worn into the mind, the way water wears a groove into stone, not through force, but through simply passing over the same place, again and again, until the place remembers the water even after it's gone. And this brings us, gently, to the third layer, the deepest one, the one that unsettles even as it comforts, where some traditions have dared to suggest that focus does not only filter, and does not only guide. It participates. There is a phrase that appears, in different clothing, across centuries and continents, that the observer changes the observed, simply by observing it. Physicists have their own strange version of this, in rooms far from any temple, involving particles that seem to behave differently depending on whether they are being watched. Nobody claims to fully understand it. Even those who study it most closely speak of it with a kind of humility bordering on reverence. We are not physicists here. We will not pretend certainty we do not have. But the poets got there first, in their own way, long before the laboratories, suggesting that a life looked at with dread tends to arrange itself around dreadful shapes, and a life looked at with hunger for meaning tends to find meaning waiting, oddly, in places that seemed empty before. Not because wishing makes it so. Something slower. Something closer to tending a garden than casting a spell. You do not summon the harvest by wanting it badly enough. You prepare the soil. You return, day after day, with the same quiet attention. And something, not everything, not on command, but something, begins, eventually, to grow toward the light you kept offering it. This is the old suspicion, stripped of its costume, that where you place your attention is also, in some small way, where you place your hands. Think of two farmers, side by side, working soil that came from the same ground. One walks the rows each morning looking for what's failing, the wilted leaf, the pest, the patch that didn't take. The other walks the same rows looking for what's working, the strong stem, the early bud, the corner catching more sun than expected. Both will find real things. The wilted leaf is there. So is the strong stem. But the first farmer's hands go, again and again, toward tearing out and treating illness. The second farmer's hands go, again and again, toward feeding what's already reaching upward. Over a season, over many seasons, two very different gardens grow from what looked, at the start, like identical ground. Not proof. Not prophecy. A pattern, noticed by enough people, in enough places, across enough time, that it seemed worth writing down, and worth handing to you now, in the dark, candle still burning, to sit with rather than swallow whole. So what do we do with a pattern like this? Not believe it blindly. Not dismiss it coldly. Something in between, something closer to practice. Here are a few ways in. The first is simple, almost embarrassingly so, the practice of naming what you saw today. Not journaling in the disciplined sense. Just, before sleep, 3 things the eyes happen to land on. A texture. A face. A color that stayed longer than it needed to. Notice what your attention chose, without your permission, all day long. The second, sit somewhere ordinary. A kitchen. A bus stop. Anywhere familiar enough to be invisible. Give yourself 60 full seconds to look for one thing you have never noticed there before. It exists. It is waiting. Attention simply hasn't reached that corner yet. The third is heavier and gentler, both at once. Think of a person or situation you have decided, quietly, is difficult. Not wrong to feel that way. Just ask, without forcing an answer, what would I notice about this if I were looking for what's still working, instead of what's broken? You may find nothing. That's allowed. The asking is the practice, not the finding. The fourth, spend 1 full minute in silence, eyes closed, attending only to sound. Not identifying each sound. Just letting it arrive, layer by layer, the way water fills a container it wasn't sure would hold it. The fifth, before entering a room you enter often, pause at the threshold. 1 breath. Ask yourself, honestly, what you expect to find inside. Then walk in and see how much of what you expected shaped what you actually saw. The sixth, choose one ordinary object, held in the hand. A cup. A stone. A key. Study it as though describing it to someone who has never seen an object like it before. Weight. Temperature. The way light sits differently across its surface. And the seventh, quieter than the rest, at the end of the day, ask simply, where did my attention live today? Not where did I want it to live? Where did it actually go, uninvited, again and again? The answer, sat with honestly, tells you more than any resolution could. An eighth, if you want it, pick one relationship in your life, someone you see often enough that they've grown almost invisible with familiarity. For one single conversation, look at their hands as they speak. Their hands, not their face, not your own reply forming in your head. Notice what changes when attention lands somewhere it hasn't rested before. And a ninth, gentler still, walk a route you've walked 100 times, and this time walk it slower than feels necessary. Let the eyes drag, on purpose, along the edges instead of the center. The center is where habit already lives. The edges are where the world has been waiting, patiently, to be noticed. None of these are rituals with power in themselves. They are small doors. What waits behind them is yours to find, or not find, in your own time. So where does this leave us? Candle low now, wax pooling slow along its side, the room a little darker than when we started. Not with an answer. With a way of looking. Maybe focus shapes reality in some way too large for any single mind to prove, the physicists still arguing, the poets still guessing, the traditions still whispering their old, half-remembered suspicions to anyone patient enough to listen. Or maybe it shapes something smaller, more modest, and no less important, the shape of a single life, lived one attention at a time, one gaze at a time, one chosen noticing at a time. Either way, something remains true enough to hold. You cannot control what crosses your path. The world will keep sending what it sends, kindness and cruelty both, wildflowers and weeds sharing the same field, uninvited and indifferent to your preference. That part was never yours to command. But the looking has always, quietly, been yours. Where you rest your eyes, again and again, across the ordinary hours of an ordinary life, that choice belongs to you, small as it seems, easy to forget, easy to spend carelessly on whatever happens to be loudest. There will be days when the loudest thing wins anyway. Grief will announce itself and refuse to be redirected. Fear will fill a room before you've had the chance to choose otherwise. That's allowed. That's simply what it means to be a person, and not a saint, and not a theory. But even on those days, underneath the noise, the old question keeps waiting quietly for you to come back to it, not as a demand, more like a lamp left on in a house you know you'll return to eventually. Not a law. Not a promise. Only a question, worth carrying past tonight, worth asking again tomorrow, in daylight, when the candle is gone and the room is full of ordinary noise again. What might change, if you simply notice what you were choosing to notice? The flame gutters, low, and goes still. The room remains, dark, ordinary, waiting to be looked at, one way or another, the moment the next light is lit. Perhaps that's all this ever really was, and all it ever needed to be. Not a secret. Not a system. Just a small, steady invitation to look again, tomorrow, with whatever attention you have left to give.